And we are ready to start. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for jumping on. It is a rainy, chilly day here in Annapolis, Maryland, but we're all here ready for our event today. And we want to thank Northrop Grumman Federal Credit Union, our partner of 22 and soon to be 23 years, which is kind of crazy, time flying. We are Blue Heron Financial Group. As I mentioned, we're located in Annapolis, Maryland, but we do work with folks all across the country. So thank you for joining us. And I am Margie Cosmerl and Liz David. And I'll start our program and then turn it over to Liz. And if you have follow-up questions, we invite you to email and we'll have a slide at the end with contact information. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so you're all here today to find out about Social Security. And it can be complex, but we're hoping to take away some of the complexity and break it down for you. And the most important thing I would say is a takeaway, but there will be several we will share, is just don't grab at the low-hanging fruit. And you'll find out more about what I mean as we go through. So get what's yours. Of course, we paid into the program and we'll talk about that formula also. So let's just go ahead and look at what the agenda will be about today. So first, when can you collect? And there's different ages, and at different ages, there's different formulas that can be applied. And there are also different taxation rules, depending. And we're going to talk about that in specifics. If you're married, then that too lends to the equation. And it's important that you're looking at it not just from your own Social Security benefit standpoint, but it's really critical that you also consider the spouse's Social Security into the overall financial and retirement planning. And there's a lot of other little considerations that we'll touch on. So we'll go ahead and get started. And again, thank you for your time today. And we want to be sensitive to that. I would expect that we will be wrapped up relatively quickly, about 30 minutes. And then, of course, as I mentioned, please feel free to contact us with follow-up questions. We have a lot of resources that we can tap into as financial and retirement planners. So we welcome those questions. So let's go back in time and think about, okay, well, why and when did Social Security even come about? So back in 1935, you might recollect from history lessons from many years ago, that takes us back to, of course, the big market upheaval of that era, and that was the Depression. Interestingly, it takes me to 2008, 2009, which was then called the Great Recession, but that just was absolutely paled in comparison to the recession back in 1930s and the Depression. So the government came up with a program to help keep people out of poverty. So that was the whole impetus of starting it. And then along came the thought, okay, well, let's kind of turn this into some monthly income. So that was about 5 years later. And they're working on the changes and perfecting. And then in 65, again, this has just been an evolution over time. And what came about in the 60s was allowing for the different ages and for being able to pull Social Security depending on the need. So that started to show up in the mid 60s. And then fast forward to the 2009 timeframe, where FRA, so here's a big vocabulary word. FRA is full retirement age. We'll be talking and saying FRA interchangeably with full retirement age throughout the presentation. So at that point, they bumped the age from 65 out to 66, not a huge change, but they did at least take into consideration that life expectancy was extending. And if we pause and think, okay, 1935, what was life expectancy? 65 then may have felt more like 85 today. So it wasn't a huge change. And yet there was some modification. And then now in 2021 and 2022 and going forward, that full retirement age has gradually increased to be 67. And we'll look at birth years and how that all plays out in just a bit. Okay, so for those who are on today's program, you have likely either worked with us for some period of time, and we thank you, or you work for Northrop Grumman perhaps. And so we're going to make some assumptions here that you have been in the working world and have accrued the credits necessary in order to receive benefits, starting as early as age 62. Liz is going to give you some reasons to think about not taking it 62 a little bit later, but these are the eligibility bullets. So you have to be at least 62 and have the 40 credits of FICA taxes being taken out of your pay. And then if you have a spouse, for example, that hasn't worked, then they will likely be eligible based on your working credits. And then as time goes on, and this is where it's always interesting to look back at your Social Security statements, and we'll tell you how to access that as well. But when you look back, I mean, myself, I started at a little pizza shop, age 6, probably 15, but I made a whopping $450 maybe that year. So as time goes on, those early years drop off, and it's the highest 35 years that the calculation is based. So I mentioned that checking into your Social Security and where it is accessible. So we always throw out, just go online, go to www.ssa, Social Security Administration.gov for government. It's a government program. And you have to put in your mother's maiden name and your Social Security, your birth year. And it's good to go back in and periodically check on it. There have been errors, and whether that's work history or having a birth date with a digit off can really create chaos when it's time to collect. So just double checking all the information that's provided. And over the last couple of years, there's been some increases to those, not only taking Social Security, but also to the formulas. So you want to go on, we do recommend going on to the ssa.gov, but you can also call the Social Security Administration, or you can even make an appointment in an office near you. All right, so let's now think in the posture of retirement, and whatever and wherever you've been working for all these years, and hopefully you've spent a fair amount of time looking into the future. And I will do just a quick, like, this is what Blue Heron does advertisement, because it is complex. When you are working all your years and you're saving, and now you're looking at retirement, it's really critical to be looking at what your needs are going to be in retirement, and then how these other pieces that are all lined up here on the side of the screen. So I'll come back to the Social Security and 40% in just a minute, but let's think about all the pieces of the retirement puzzle that are going to play into your new paycheck in retirement. So the years and years that you've been saving into a 401k or maybe a 403b, we could just take that a step further and talk about Roth 401k and pre-tax 401k. I'm going to pull myself back to the task at hand and just think of that as a bucket there. And if you are fortunate enough to have had worked for the company that has a pension, then that can be a very important part of the equation as well. With pensions, there's a lot of different considerations. Once again, this is where Liz and I really dissect these different options that you have and all the decisions that you will be making going into retirement are lifelong decisions. So it's important that you get it right. Employee stock. Once again, we could spend a lot of time talking about employee stock, and there are some tax advantages to possibly consider if you're holding employee stock, for example, in your 401k plan. If that applies to you, then by all means, you can always send us an email and say, what were you talking about? But for the purpose, again, for today, we're looking at all these sources to be replacing that paycheck that you've had coming in for years and years. HSA, FSA, health savings account, HSA, it's probably one of the most overlooked benefits that employees can contribute to. And you also have the option to invest those dollars. FSA, flexible savings account, also can be a good company benefit to help lower those costs of whether childcare or health, et cetera. And then you have your other savings, IRAs, mutual funds, annuities, maybe real estate, insurance. So as I'm rattling off all these different pieces, and I do call them to the puzzle, then just I ask you to get your head around, okay, well, when do I take what? And that brings us back to the task at hand in discussing Social Security today. So all of the different items listed here, and then the last two, government pension perhaps, and then Social Security, they all have different tax impacts. And once again, Blue Heron, quick advertisement here, but it's important that you understand, and we say it all the time, one thing begets the next thing that begets the next thing. And what I mean by that is, if you come out of the gate in retirement and you start taking your Social Security at age 62 and you're putting off taking IRA distributions, that might be contrary to what we would recommend. And we'll talk more about that as well. So I mentioned before that the FRA is based on different years of birth. So you have that chart here. I'll give you just a minute or two to locate your birth year. And for those, I'll call the young ones in the group that are born in 1960 or later, that full retirement age is 67. Now, that doesn't mean you have to wait until 67 to retire. It just means that with regards to Social Security, that this is where the formula is based. If you take it early, it's going to reduce your benefits as calculated off of your full retirement age. If you wait and postpone beyond your full retirement age, then this is where the calculation occurs and going forward. So FRA, new vocabulary word perhaps to some, but it's important that you recognize what your full retirement age is. And Liz is going to talk in a little bit also about the impact about, as I mentioned, taking it before full retirement age.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Margie. So this is really important. And again, I think Margie did a really great job just highlighting, committing that full retirement age number to memory is so important because it's such a big factor in overall retirement planning. And Social Security, like Margie touched on, is a huge piece of your retirement income. And so our job and your job is to figure out, okay, when you're no longer working, how are we going to recreate your paycheck? How much of a paycheck do you need? Those are all really important pieces. So I think highlighting again, this is that same exact chart, but it shows you there's a really common, we see misconception that If I take it at 62, I'm only taking a 25% reduction. But because that full retirement age number has been pushed out from 65 up to 67, the younger you are, the more of a discount you're going to take on Social Security. So I think just if you hop down to the very bottom and you see, if you're born in 1960 or later, you're going to take a 30% haircut for life on your Social Security paycheck if you take it at 62. So 62 is going to be the least amount that you could get. There's also a potential reduction from penalty for working. So we're going to talk a lot about that, but just that full retirement age number is so important because anything under full retirement age, you're more limited from income, and you're absolutely going to take a reduction for benefit. Taking it one step further, the reduction, especially if you have a spouse who's dependent, it may not just be for your life. So if your Social Security is the higher between you and your spouse, yours is going to be the Social Security that lasts forever. So if you choose to take it at 62, you take a 30% haircut, that passes to your surviving spouse as well.
I'm just going to add a quick story in here. Liz and I sat down with a couple, and he had already applied for Social Security because he thought, I'm 62, I'm just going to jump on this. And we had our meeting, and we said, okay, let's just slow down for a minute. Because he had been the major breadwinner in the family, we explained that if he passes away, his surviving spouse's benefit has been reduced so dramatically, not just his by taking it early, but also hers. So in that scenario, he actually had time to go back and stop. It hadn't kicked off quite yet, the Social Security benefits. So I just wanted to share that story.
All right, so claiming at age 70. So 70 is, there's a lot of numbers out there. So we try to make them as clear as possible when it comes to just Social Security, retirement planning in general. Age 70 is the latest. You likely want to wait to take Social Security because it's going to be, that's where Social Security maxes out. If you don't claim it, then it's not going to increase anymore. So you don't want to wait beyond age 70. But the other important thing is beyond whatever your full retirement age is, so let's just call it 66 to age 70, it's an 8% per year increase. And what Margie and I often say is there's nowhere out there in the market that can guarantee at this juncture an 8% return. So it's really important to be mindful of, 7% increase per year from 62 to full retirement age. And then from full retirement age to 70, it's an 8% per year increase. And we say per year, but really your check goes up every single month that you wait. So it doesn't have to be, I think sometimes people say, I want to retire at 62, and they just feel this need to get their hands on whatever income is easily accessible, which Social Security, again, using Margie's words, can seem like low-hanging fruit. But Social Security is a permanent decision, and you are taking a significant reduction at that point. And so it really comes back to that planning and figuring out how much of a paycheck you need. Beyond age 70, again, it's the highest monthly check, and there's no penalty for employment. So once you are your full retirement age, you have as much earning potential as you want. I'm going to talk more about that in a second. So when should you take your benefit? I think this is a really great chart. It basically just shows you, okay, if you take it at 62, assuming 66 full retirement age, you're getting less than 80% of your paycheck, really closer to 70. And then beyond, you can't see my mouse, sorry. Beyond age 70 or beyond your full retirement age, you're increasing that paycheck. And again, just keeping in mind that that is for you or your surviving spouse, which is really important. Okay, so this is one of the most important factors because we are seeing folks work later. And so if you are under your full retirement age, so again, let's just go with 66, you are limited on earned income to $19,560 per year. So what Margie, another story we can think of is we have a client who lost his brother suddenly at a young age. And he thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to go out and take my Social Security. And then the next year he got a really great contracting job and basically earned his way out of getting his paycheck. So he had locked in a reduction on his income from Social Security standpoint. and then he was ended up paying it back anyway. So you really want to be cognizant of the fact that you could return to work, or you may return to work, and how limited you are on income. If you can click one more time. Thank you, Margie. Once you're full retirement age, that year that you turn your full retirement age, that income amount increases to just under 52,000. But anything you earn over that amount, you're going to take $1 away for every $3 over. And then once you're full retirement age, there's no limit on earnings. So again, you just want to keep in mind that it is a permanent decision, and it impacts how much you can earn before you just basically start paying Uncle Sam back the money that you've taken, and you're locking in that reduction. So full retirement age is so important on getting your full benefit and not being limited from an earning standpoint.
And we've seen it, I mean, Liz cited the one example, but we've seen it happen time and time again where, okay, retirement, yay. And then after some months, there's some boredom perhaps that's setting in. Now, those of us who have been working years and years might say, that'll never happen. But we assure you it does. And even with Northrop Grumman, I mean, there's many, kind of going back to what they did 20 years ago, it seems, with hiring back and contracting. Again, we make no guarantees about anything, but these are just observations. So if there's that retirement before full retirement age, and then you kick off Social Security, and then you're bored or find the need to go back to work, you're really restricting yourself. And that's what we're helping to avoid, and coming up with other solutions so that you don't kind of shoot yourself in the foot.
And one more thing on the similar story, the IRS is not going to catch that right away. So 9 times out of 10, you're getting either a big fat bill to say, oh, we overpaid you on Social Security, you need to pay us back, or they withhold future paychecks until you've repaid that bill. So it's not, it may be a catch up and then income that you planned on coming, but they're basically siphoning off of your existing Social Security check.
Good point.
Something else on the planning side of things that Margie and I see is, we work with a lot of engineers, and they have really great spreadsheets. You all follow what you spend, which is really the key to success at any point. We don't like to look at it like a budget. We really just want to know what it takes for you to live the life that makes you happy. And again, it always starts with expenses, but then when we look at the income side of things, oftentimes that tax piece is missing, and the taxes are really important. Margie touched on earlier, pre-tax 401k versus Roth. For decades, really, pre-tax was the only option. Now Roth is an option, with a lot of other ways to build some tax-free buckets. But when it comes to Social Security, oftentimes we hear it's tax-free. And usually it is not. For most of the folks who have saved, maybe have pension, you can see here, if you're single, if you earn under $25,000 a year, then okay, Social Security is not taxable. Under $32,000 for married, filing jointly. But for single, over 34, and married, over 44,000. And what that means is if you have taxable dollars coming into your household from any direction, whether it's pension, whether it's 401k distributions, it could be dividends, it could be capital gains, all of those things, all of those pieces feed into determining whether or not your Social Security is taxable. So it will never be 100% tax. Every dollar will not necessarily be taxed, but very likely that up to 85% of your Social Security will be included in your adjusted gross income. And then taking it one step further, Margie touched on this. I know today is fully Social Security, but your taxable income impacts things like how much you pay for Medicare every year. So it's really important to just know this information and know how, number one, you might want to have taxes withheld if you're not doing the estimated quarterlies. And you also want to be mindful of, what's your burden going to be when it comes to your Medicare premiums as well.
Yeah, I think Liz's point, I'm just going to reiterate it because once again, we're just sharing with you things that we've seen happen over the years so that you can hopefully avoid making some of these mistakes. So when it's time, whether there's pension out there or IRA distributions and Social Security, making sure that you're withholding enough taxes. I think that catches a lot of people, especially the first year in retirement, off guard. So all those items listed on the bottom that Liz mentioned, your AGI, your tax exempt income and Social Security benefit all feed into this provisional income of how much of Social Security is going to be taxed. But then you also need to be looking at those other parts that I listed off earlier and make sure you're withholding enough so that you don't get penalized later.
All right, so these are just different options on how you can access Social Security. So there is a spousal benefit. The spouse can collect up to 50% of the spouse's full retirement age benefit. So this is important, and I think we have a chart that shows it. But let's just say my husband waits until 70 to collect his Social Security. I will only ever be entitled to half of whatever his full retirement age amount was. On the flip side, if he takes it at 62, I will only get half of what he takes at 62. So 50% of maximum full retirement age amount, or half of whatever their benefit is when they start claiming. To receive a spousal benefit, the other spouse must be collecting. This is a change, and we're going to touch on one strategy that I will highlight and then tell you to quickly forget if you're born after 1954, because it will just confuse you. But again, if you are married and you want to receive a spousal benefit, your spouse has to be collecting their benefit at the same time. Divorced and widows is a different story. So divorced have to have been married for at least 10 years and not currently remarried. And you must be 62 or older and in divorce at least 2 years if your ex has not already filed for Social Security. And again, that one is going to be 50% at max of their full retirement age amount. Survivors and widows generally have the most flexible. They can receive up to 100% of the deceased spouse benefit, full retirement age amount. Or if that spouse passes away and they didn't collect until 70, then they will get that stepped up amount, which is really important too. 60 or older is when you're able to collect, but you will take a significant discount. So it does give widows and widowers the flexibility to collect at age 60, but it still is going to be that 7% per year reduction from whatever the full retirement age is. So it doesn't come without the penalty.
That could be almost 50%, really.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. All right. So this is just a really, I think, easy to look at case study. So here's Sam and Ann. Ann was the breadwinner. Sam's age 62 amount is $750. Full retirement age amount is $1,000. And then if he waited till age 70, it's $1,320. Ann, $1,800 at 62, $2,400 at full retirement age, $3,168. And I think this is a great illustration to just see the power of that 8% increase from full retirement age to 70, $3,168. So the spousal benefit, as you can see, would be reduced if Ann took it early, that first column. If Ann took her Social Security early, then Sam's amount would be reduced, and then even reduced further for him taking it at 62. And then half at full retirement age, and even half, and then still half of full retirement age if they both wait till 70. His is not going to increase. All right, so restricted application. This is the one. These are just different strategies from a Social Security standpoint. And quite candidly, 10 years ago, there were a lot more strategies. They could make your head spin. If anybody is born after 1954, really, I think anybody who qualifies for this restricted application is probably already doing it. So if you're beyond 1954, ignore this. But basically what could happen is at full retirement age, the spouse could claim only spousal benefit. So I could say, I want to let my own personal Social Security grow. I'm just going to take half of my husband's, and then mine continues to grow by the 8%. Again, if you were born after 1954, that option is gone. I also don't love the do-over. Marge and I talk about this often. You know, there is right now the option to revoke claiming the decision if it was made within 12 months of filing. So we caught, Margie told the story earlier, he hadn't even gotten his first check, thank God. But some people say, well, and I think now more than ever, we're hearing about I-bonds. So I'll just use that as an example. You know, I could take 12 months of income and go dump it into an I-bond at 9%, and then I could pay it back, and then I win, basically. This has been on the chopping block often. So we'll talk, there are a lot of ways that Social Security needs to be addressed politically to make sure that the system can continue to run. The do-over is one of the things that's on the chopping block. So number two things, if you get that income and you spend it and then your plan is to pay it back and you don't have the money, well, then you've locked yourself into that reduced amount. And then if you start it and then 6 months in, the do-over is revoked, that would be a hindrance too. So we really don't like to look at that as a viable strategy. Suspending benefits, we do think that this is an option. So you can suspend your own benefits at full retirement age. So again, maybe you get in retirement, you take it early, and then you realize, hey, I don't really need this. You can suspend the benefits and restart that delayed credit, which is important. All right, we can flip to the next one if you don't mind. So future of Social Security, again, this could be a whole conversation. There's a lot of studies, Margie and I often say it's just kind of that hot potato that nobody really wants to address. We really think that increasing the FICA taxes is probably the most valid. So pushing out that year of when full retirement age is, again, I fully anticipate that my full retirement age will be closer to 70. We're all living longer. It makes sense. And again, we've started to see that inch out. And then increasing, taking the income limit off of it so that people don't ever stop paying into Social Security, we think could be two good solutions.
There is some talk about that. I forget the congresswoman who brought that up, but it has been such a hot potato for decades, and nobody just wants to make the stand. But I feel like it's only 8 years down the road, and we will hear this concern from clients sometimes that, well, what if it's gone? What if it's not here? Now, we want to acknowledge that as a concern, number one, okay. However, there is that strong likelihood it will be addressed. We Americans kind of wait till the last minute on addressing some things that are critical, but we do feel that one of these solutions or a combination of these solutions will apply. And for planning purposes, we go with what we know. And what that SSA.gov benefit website says, that's what we're going to use until anything changes.
And back to just overall planning. Again, Social Security, we've seen some really nice bumps from an inflation standpoint. We went a long time without seeing any bumps. Anybody who's on Social Security today, you're seeing a really nice bump come 2023. We are not going to count on an 8% raise from Social Security. So that's where, going back to just overall planning, understanding what you need to live the lifestyle you're accustomed to, and then back into where is that income going to come from? Social Security is certainly going to be a piece of it, but we want to make sure that nobody thinks it's going to be 100%. And we don't want to be unrealistic in terms of taxes. And, again, not going to see a 3-4% consistent increase in perpetuity is our professional opinion. So things to think about, working with a financial professional, really getting a sound personalized plan in place is so important, because you have to evaluate what your income needs are. Again, what does it take you to be comfortable? You don't want to trade the stress of work for the stress of money in retirement. I think there's this old adage maybe of, well, I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. And Margie and I see all the time, you don't want your lifestyle to change 90% of the time when you move from working to retirement. And so that income has to come from somewhere. And for most of us, that taxable bucket has become the larger piece. And then that makes Social Security taxable, and on it goes. To Margie's point, I think she's harped on this in a positive way, creating that Social Security account online now, even if you're years from retirement, go on there, make sure they have your accurate information, work history, Social Security number, birthday, because all of those things are much easier to fix now than at the time you're trying to claim. Determine filing timeline. And this is just what we always say too. It's a moving target. Just because we encourage, let's say somebody wants to retire at 62, not reaching for that benefit immediately, it can be a moving target. It doesn't have to be that just because you don't take it at 62, now you have to wait till 67. Health impacts it, longevity. None of us know the day we're going to go meet our maker, but longevity plays a big role. Your spouse's dependency on that income is a huge piece of it. what other sources of income you have, the markets, all of those things play a role in deciding when to take Social Security. So we just ask that you don't just turn it on to turn it on, and you make sure it's a mindful, just no different than your pension. I mean, your pension is a permanent decision. I often, if for those of you who work at Northrop Grumman, you log into that Fidelity Net Benefits, and your pension number that pops up on that first screen is if you work till 65 and you don't take any reduction for your spouse. So sometimes it's an artificially high number, and we want to make sure that you're really working with accurate information that's personalized for you and your family before you just hit the go button and make that permanent decision. And then applying for benefits. So I just talked to somebody earlier, I mean, not, it was last week. You know, she's a widow, unfortunately, and she could not access her deceased husband's information online. So for most of us, if you're a basic situation, you can probably do all of this online. But if there's anything complicated or you have any questions, we encourage you to call or go in, and make sure you go with your list of questions. You know, you want to make sure you get somebody who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, and for the most part, we've heard positive feedback from those in the Social Security office, but there's also, in our opinion, sometimes advice provided without that individual looking at the big picture. And that's where Blue Heron comes in. We're always looking at the big picture, whether that is the markets. As we know, they've been up this year, to put it mildly. And yet our job as planners is to be looking at the impact of all of this, how it relates to retirement. Liz and I just had a Zoom meeting with a very long-term client who we've worked with, oh gosh, 25 plus years. I'll stop there. And I'm just going to share this because it'll warm my heart for the rest of the day. He and his wife said, thank you for all that you've done. When we go to Florida this winter, all we really worry about is whether to take the waffle maker or not. And, you know, that's what gets us up in the morning. We know how complex it is, and we have to be on our game, so to speak, to understand whether it's taxes, what's taking place in the economy, investment solutions and strategies. And Liz just said it, to help you live your best retirement. And, you know, if we can take away some of that stress, then we want to be here for you.
We'll go ahead and jump over this. Some of our contact information. We covered a lot. Your Social Security situation is so personal, as is retirement planning. So again, we hope that you took something away from today. We know that your time is precious, and we really appreciate you spending, you know, almost 40 minutes on here today. And again, we really hope you found something to be helpful. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we're always here.
Thank you again. Happy holidays, and let us know if we can help.